Welcome to Lawo's VSM video training series on panel building. In this video, we'll learn more about changing the color attributes of buttons and some additional page layout efficiencies by using one button placed on multiple panels. Since the previous training video, we've added a few buttons on other pages, so don't be surprised if you see a few more buttons than you saw in the previous video. And by the way, let's save our work now. It's always a good idea to save your work often with VSM Studio, like any other software application. You can see, in addition to camera sources on our camera page, we also now have camera targets. As we go to the next step, remember from the previous video the button feature called Show on All Pages, where you can take one button that you've created on one panel page and it will show up with the right setting on all pages. Keep that in mind. Also notice, as we've added buttons to the various pages on this panel, we've kept the top row open. We've only added our buttons manually to the second and third rows. Now let's take a look at what we have planned with this extra space along the top. Notice our Sources button is on page 1, but we haven't assigned it yet, so let's assign it to page 1. Suddenly you'll see in VSM Panel that the Sources button in the panel has turned yellow, or active. That's because now we've assigned the Sources button to page 1 and the VSM Panel application is already on page 1, so the Sources button lights up because it's the active button. Let's do the same with the Targets button. Let's assign that to page 1. And again, now that we have assigned it, you'll see that the button on the VSM Panel application also turns active, which we see by it turning yellow. Now let's change a personal preference here. Perhaps we want the Active Sources button to be blue instead of yellow. That's easy. We'll go up into the Properties for the button and change the background color to blue. And also let's match the targets so that when we are on page 1, the Active Targets button is blue, not yellow. In both examples, we'll leave the text white because it's still easy to read. We like on page 1 how we have top-level hierarchical access to all the other navigational subpages because of these buttons across the top. But notice on the target side, once we go to another destination page, for instance cameras, we've lost that top-level hierarchical access, which would mean we'd have to hit the escape button and start back from page 1, which is not very efficient. So, this is where the fun begins. Remember the feature Show on All Pages. Because of the size of this panel, and because of the size of the facility and the inputs and outputs, we have room to add these additional navigational buttons across the top on both the Sources and Target sides of the panels. Now what we'll do is assign all these top-level generic navigation buttons to Show on All Pages. We'll even do it for this one empty one on the source side, because you never know when we may need to add another navigation page later. Notice again that after we select a page to show on all pages, the black square surrounds the button and a small little black triangle shows up in the upper right-hand corner. So now in VSM Panel, let's click the Camera Source button. And notice that the top hierarchical buttons are now there that we can use to navigate directly to other signal path family sources. We see the button is active and yellow, but we don't like the yellow. Remember that we've changed our active button color to the color blue. If we have a button whose style we'd like to copy to a selection of other buttons, we first select all the buttons we want to copy the style onto. We left-click the first button, and while holding the Shift key down, select all other buttons that we want to copy the style onto. And then lastly, we left-click the button whose style we want to copy. Then we release the Shift key and right-click and select Copy Style. And in this case, as VSM checks all boxes by default, that's what we want to do, and we'll just click OK. Now the style of the last button we clicked on, the blue one with the white text, will now be copied to all the other buttons. So now, as we navigate across the top row buttons, each signal path family turns blue when it's the active button. And of course, when we press Sources, we're back on our home page where no signal path families have yet been selected. Notice here over in targets, whoops, our favorite color is not yellow, our favorite color is blue. So let's change these as well, so that the active signal path family page color is blue, not yellow. So we start with monitor, and then while holding the shift key down, click on all the buttons we want to change, and then lastly, click on the blue button, the style we want to copy from. Then we release the shift key and right click and select copy style. As VSM checks all boxes by default, just click OK. Now our active button is turned blue, and you would of course see this color change reflected on your LBP button panels as well. Notice that when you select a color for your button, there has to be a matching color for the hardware panel. Also, you cannot change the font color, so black text may not show up properly on a button panel. That's why, especially when you're new to building panels, it's always helpful to have a hardware panel in front of you so that you can see the changes in real time on an actual hardware panel and see how they look. So here we have a fairly nice XY panel where we can select any source from our facility and route to any destination within our facility with pretty efficient navigational pages.